Hello, friends and clients. I am Jennifer Walker Gates with JLW Immigration Law Group. We are a women-owned and women-led immigration law firm in Austin, Texas, where we focus on helping clients gain legal status in the United States, become U.S. citizens, and reunite their families. Really happy and proud to be here with you today on behalf of JLW Immigration Law Group. And today's topic is how to fill out Form I-485, specifically our top 10 tips for completing Form I-485. If you don't know, Form I-485 is the form that you use to apply for residency in the United States, or what's called adjustment of status. So last week we did a video about Form I-130, which is the form that kicks it all off for a family-based immigration case. And Form I-485 would be something that if you are eligible to become a resident through a family member, that's the form you would file. Sometimes you file it with Form I-130. Sometimes you file it separately later. It depends on your case. So there is a lot to know about Form I-485 and a lot that I'm not going to be able to get into in this video. So if you do have questions about fundamental things like your eligibility to file Form I-485 to adjust status in the United States, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. Please feel free to leave questions and comments below this video. I will answer them as best and as fast as I can. And before we get into the topic, please hit subscribe. We are going to be publishing information regularly about immigration law, about updates, about information that the immigrant community needs to be able to get the legal status they deserve in the United States. So please hit subscribe and let's get to it. All right, so Form I-485 has 20 pages. The last page is just kind of an overflow page. It's where you can add information if it wouldn't fit in the fields on the regular form. Yeah, so Form I-485 has actually 19 pages of really important, relevant information that you need to pay attention to. It's a lot. Here are our top 10 tips, and I'm going to go in reverse chronological order this time. So counting down, number 10. Tip number 10 is to confirm all the important details that don't seem important. Which are you using the correct edition of the form? Are your filing fees correct? Is the filing address correct on your packet? These things seem like they're not a big deal, but they are a huge deal if you don't want your case to be delayed, complicated, lost, or something like that. If you are not filing with the most recent edition of the form, or you have the wrong fees, or you sent to the wrong address, your packet will be rejected and sent back to you. And this will add potentially an additional 2 months or so to your case, if it even gets back to you at all. We have had plenty of cases that were rejected and then didn't make it back because USCIS isn't always super careful when they do stuff like that too. So please make sure that you do check those little details before you send out your packet. Number 9, keep a copy of everything you send to USCIS. This is really important. Can't tell you how many times we've worked with clients who came in after they had filed their case because there was some kind of problem or complication, but they didn't have a copy of what they had filed. Then we have to request that copy directly from USCIS, and that takes time. So please make sure that you keep a copy of everything. It's best for your safety and security and the success of your case. Tip number 8, read the instructions for the form. Really helpful information in those instructions. But be ready for the fact that those instructions are not going to tell you how to answer all the questions. There is a lot of vocabulary in this form, a lot of terminology that you may not know or understand. A lot of those definitions you can find in the form instructions, but not all. So that brings me to the next tip, which is that as you're going through the form, you're going to notice that it asks you for a lot of information, and you're going to think to yourself, do I really need to provide every single address that I've lived at for the past 5 years? Do I need to really provide the dates that I moved into and out of every address? Do I really have to provide my start date and end date for every job I've had in the past 5 years, every marriage I've had ever in my life? The answer is yes. Now, it's important to note that sometimes people have not kept clear records. We've seen this a lot with our clients. Like maybe they were in college during the last 5 years, and they lived in a bunch of different places, and they didn't keep records of every single address. And that is normal. That is okay. In the case where you may not have the exact date dates of move in and move out, or start date and end date for a job. On those, you can put approximate dates. We usually indicate that with a little note on the form. We just write approximate dates underneath the date, or maybe put a little squiggle line next to the date, something to indicate that it is an approximate date. That's fine. What USCIS is looking for on this kind of history of addresses and jobs is consistency. So, for example, if you have a job at an oil company in West Texas for a year that you list on your application for residency, but then you don't list it later in your application for naturalization, they might ask you about it. And so you want to be able to be consistent about these kinds of information. And again, if you don't remember the exact dates, you can say, I don't remember the exact dates. And as long as that remains consistently your answer, it's going to be fine as well. Now, with your marriages, you do need to know the dates. You need to have documentation that all your prior marriages, if any, have been legally terminated either through death of the prior spouse, or divorce, or annulment. All of those are legal ways to end a marriage, but you do have to have documentation that all prior marriages have been ended. Number 6, children is a really important thing on these forms. I've seen lots and lots of people make mistakes on this one. So if you have any biological children, children who are legally adopted, children who are stepchildren, all of those kiddos have to be listed. Doesn't matter how old they are. They may not be kiddos anymore. They might be adults. They might be married. They might be living in another country. They might not be children of your current marriage. They might have been born while you were married, but outside of your marriage. All of that is okay as long as you list them. We've seen too many people leave children off of one application and then later try to file paperwork on behalf of those kids. That doesn't work. So please do make sure that you list all of the kids, biological, adopted, and stepchildren, no matter what. Now, if you raised a child that you did not legally adopt, that is not a child you will list. So you need to be clear about that distinction, legal adoption versus sort of informal adoption, which we do see quite a bit. Children who were informally adopted and not legally adopted are not actually considered your children for immigration purposes, so you cannot list those children as children on the form. All right, number 5, the new form, the new I-485 form that was published December 22nd of 2022 or 23rd of 2022, at the end of December of 2022, has a couple of important changes. Number 1 is that it asks if you've ever committed a crime of any kind for which you have not been arrested or cited or charged or indicted or sentenced or convicted. Okay, so citations, when it says cited, even if you weren't arrested or cited, a citation is just a little ticket. Now, I cannot imagine a person who's never broken the law and gotten away with it. So, for example, speeding in your car would be something for which you could be cited. Walking across the street in the United States when you're not at a crosswalk, that is something for which you could be cited depending on where you are. Parking tickets. That is another thing that you can get a ticket for that, for parking illegally. You can get a ticket for parking in a handicap spot. You can get a ticket for being a minor in possession of alcohol. All of those things that you used to not have to list as crimes need to be listed now, because this is a very broad question. I can't imagine why they wanted to make this question so broad. They're going to get inundated with paperwork, but better to play it safe. Disclose if you've ever broken the speed limit, if you've ever walked across the street when you weren't supposed to, anything like that. It seems silly, but I can't imagine how else to answer the question. That brings me to number 4, which is it let you know that you can use extra copies of that overflow sheet, which is page 20 or part 14 of the form 485. You can make extra copies of that or print out extra copies of that if you need them, so that you can list all the information that is required by the form. The form itself may not have the space for everything that you need, and that's fine, as long as you print out extra copies of that. Page number 3, counting down, just 3 more to go. The question, are you subject to the public charge ground of inadmissibility under INA section 212D4, is another new one. That is a new question. That public charge question was not on the previous edition of Form I-485, but as of the end of 2022, the new form includes this question. And then it has a bunch of additional questions about your financial circumstances. Now, 99.99% of applicants using Form I-485 are going to need to answer no to that question. Are you subject to the public charge ground of inadmissibility? And then skip all the questions that follow about your personal financial circumstances. The only time that you, the applicant for adjustment of status, would need to answer yes to that question about being a public charge is if you have received Social Security income yourself, not on behalf of your child, not on behalf of any dependent in your household. You yourself have received Social Security income, temporary assistance for needy families, or general cash assistance from a government source. Now, or if you have ever been institutionalized at government expense. Long-term institutionalization at government expense is another ground for which you can be found to be a public charge. But that's it. Those are the only two. And I will tell you that immigrants who are not already lawful permanent residents or who are not already in refugee status or something like that don't qualify for these benefits. And so most people are going to need to answer no to that question, and then skip all the weird, uncomfortable personal questions that follow about your educational background, your work history, etc. So, number 2, this is a really important one. Answer all the questions truthfully to the best of your ability. Do not try to answer incorrectly or dishonestly on these questions so that you think that you can make yourself eligible. It will not be worth it. It will cause more problems in the long term. If you need help, if you don't know how to answer, if you don't feel sure about your answers, then get help from a trusted attorney in answering these questions. Pay for a consult. It will be well worth the amount of money that you spend to be able to ask some questions. Now, be forewarned, not all immigration attorneys want to answer questions about how to answer that form. It is tough to give legal advice when you're just meeting with someone briefly in a consultation. We at JLW Immigration Law Group will answer questions about the forms. And if we can't tell you specifically how to answer a question yourself based on our lack of knowledge of your personal circumstances, then we will give you as much general information and context about what the form is asking as we possibly can to make it possible for you. You are not required to have an attorney for your immigration case. It is really helpful, in my opinion, speaking, of course, as an attorney, I am biased, but it is really helpful to have an attorney who has experience, who has training, who knows what these terms mean and what they're getting at and what are the policies behind them. But if you don't have an attorney and you don't have the means to get one, or you're just not going to, or whatever, we also believe that you still deserve to have as much assistance as you possibly can. So I hope that this video has been helpful. With that, again, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to our channel. Come back next week. Come back with us. We will be here providing this kind of information as much as we can and answering your questions and comments in the fields below the video. So be in touch. Take good care. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much.